Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. This we should call this the Double D series. Dan DEVERNA has gone from inviting himself onto these videos to actually moving into my house. And so if you've ever seen the movie What About Bob, we're going to change that to What About Dan. He will not go away. Anyway, in today's video, we're going to talk about the benefit of coming from a blue-collar family. Most people think, white-collar families, and white-collar when I say doctors, lawyers, architects, engineers, they go to the private school, they get all the good stuff. That's how they excel to the top. My argument would be coming from a blue-collar family actually gives you advantages over those types of families. So anyway, without further ado, Dan, welcome back to the show, and please quit using my shampoo.
Thanks for having me, and we're not using a lot. And your motorcycle's so clean. I can't believe you're even complaining about this.
Please don't ever touch my motorcycle. And I just want you to look at what's going on here. Like this magic. Look, I can't even get it in the screen.
Wow.
Like, what is that? Remember,
I was thinking that exactly. What is that?
Remember Flock of Seagulls?
Yeah.
Okay, how about some of that right there?
It's real fancy.
This is how we're gonna do this. This is my emo. Dan, you and I come from blue-collar families. Talk to me about what you think some of the benefits are of coming from a family where, mom and dad hardworking, not that other families aren't hardworking, but that blue collar. Talk to me about what you think some of the advantages are of coming from that background.
Ton of advantages. I think I could go on for probably an hour about it because it's a big deal, the way I was raised. And I try to do that with my kids, and it's just a lot harder. It's harder for me to do it than I think my mom and dad were just better at doing the parenting thing in some respects. But having to work for things like that, whether it was my first car or getting my first job picking strawberries at Burchin's farm at 12 years old, like just not taking much for granted. We didn't have a lot, but we had a great family. We had a great community with our church and with our down in Pemberville, Ohio. So knowing a lot of normal people, and we didn't know at the time if we knew we weren't rich, but we didn't know if we were poor or middle class. Like, we didn't really even talk that much about money, but I could see, because the way my dad worked and my family worked, that people that we were around were working hard every day. And that was a great lesson to learn.
Well, I grew up with my mom and my stepdad, and my stepdad was an operating engineer, and so he would often work in the bush, and he would go in, in the winter, and he would be in camp for 3-4 weeks at a time. And they would fly him into camp, and he would run a machine, and then he would come out for a week or two and then go back in. And I remember saying to him, because he would show me his time cards, and I'd be like, "You worked 17 hours that day?" And he's like, "Yeah." And I'm like, "Well, why would you work so much? Like, can't you just work 8? And he's like, "Yeah, you could work 8, but I'm there, so why wouldn't I do the work?" And I'm like, "Well, it just seems like a lot." And he's like, "What I'm going to do, watch TV? Like, I'm there to make money and to try to create a better life for us. And so when I'm in camp, I'm willing to work every hour that I'm not sleeping." And that was a mindset that kind of stuck into my head and that served me when I started building Think Tank 20 years ago. Is the only thing I did other than work was sleep, because I was trying to create that opportunity. And I think that was modeled from my union stepdad, who was on breakup every spring for a couple of months, but would work the heat of the summer, minus 40-degree weather in the winter, and just get to work, get your work boots, and get busy.
I remember Saturday mornings, well, really every morning, we would have to do certain things before we were able to go do the things we wanted to do, which is a lot like real life, right? You have a job, you got to go do your job. Especially if you have a job like I have, like you have, where nobody's standing over you saying you have to get this done today. Like, it's on you to get it done. So you check these boxes and get these things done, then you can go play or do whatever you want to do. But until then, and for us, it was the Pemberville pool. The Pemberville pool opened at 1 o'clock. I'll remember that for as long as I can remember stuff, because I knew that we needed to get done with all of our chores and stuff by 12:45 and have eaten lunch, for us to be able to get up there on our bikes, me and my brothers, to get up there in time so we could be there when the pool opened. Because you want to be there when the pool opened, and you knew they were going to throw you out at 10 till 5. So that was the what we were looking to do. So the morning, whatever we had to do in the morning to make that afternoon awesome is what we were going to do. And that's exactly the way work is. It's just a little bit longer generally.
Well, you know, when I was a kid growing up, I mean, once my parents split, I would spend summers with my dad. My dad used to get up at 4:30 or 5, and then we'd go for breakfast at the hotel at 6. And then he would kind of go to work, and I would either be, if he was in the bush, I would go in the bush with him. Or if I was in town, he'd drop me off at the pool. And to your pool story, that's why I was smiling, is the pool in Merritt, which is just outside of Kamloops, was open from 9 to 4. And so he would drop me off at 6:45 a.m. and I would sit, like, lean against the chain link fence for 2.5 hours reading a book, waiting for the pool to open. And he would always give me money to buy lunch at 7-Eleven, right? Like a Big Bite and a Slurpee.
Mm-hmm.
And then the pool would close at 5, and he would often work till 6 or 7. When I started Think Tank and I was putting in the 16 or 18 hour days, they were long, but they weren't foreign. I was used to, you know, in my youth, you know, as a 10, 11-year-old, putting in those hours. How did watching how, you know, your dad, your grandpa, all of these great people around you, when you saw their work ethic, how did that translate to you when you first got into kind of the workforce?
Well, I just thought that's the way it was. I thought that's the way people worked. And I remember a story my grandpa Vogapol, who's still with us at 96 years old, told about it. He was working at the refinery, which was Ohio, and they had hired some consultants to do some outside stuff. And one of the consultants followed my grandpa for a few days, and they normally don't follow them for many days. They usually follow them for a day, I guess. But they followed my grandpa for several days. And they were asking by this, I don't know, third or fourth day, like why he was still moving at such a pace. And they thought it was just because that's what they were doing. He was doing that for them, just to show them. And he's like, and the supervisors were like, no, that's Ralph. That's what Ralph does, you know? And so hearing those stories and watching my dad work hard and knowing that really on both sides of the family, everybody always worked hard. It was really interesting because me and my two brothers were not mechanically inclined. So we went to different types of jobs, but stylistically, like, we were just entrenched in hard work, and that's what you did. And so we were proud to do it, happy to do it. But frankly, we just didn't even know otherwise. Like, that was just the way it was.
Translating that, and so we're not old. I mean, at least we don't think we're old. Anyone in their 20s or 30s watching this thinks that we're super old.
For sure.
What are you noticing in the 25-year-olds today? Like, I've become that old man who bitches at people to get off their lawn, if you know what I mean. Like, I'm looking at the youth coming out today and I'm like, what's going on? You know what I mean? Like, it's not only like there's not a pride in the work, but it's not like I don't actually want to do work, or I only want to do work that matters to me. What do you think happens when such a radical shift happens with the way that people approach their work?
I think it's going to be pretty interesting to see how all of it plays out, because the gear shift from my generation and yours down to the millennials, it's a whole different perspective. And it doesn't mean that they're necessarily wrong, but their priorities are extremely different. And the other thing is we're seeing a lot of them be really conservative stylistically. They're completely fine with jumping from job to job to job. They want their investments to be really secure and consistent and predictable, but they want everything just to go kind of seamlessly, which is really hard if you're a small business person, even a salesperson. Consistency is not necessarily going to happen. And so I guess it's tough for me to get in their minds. I've struggled with it. I had my first job at 12 years old. Well, my son Drake, he got his first job at 18. And so it's tough to say, okay, so at 20 years old, he should behave like I did when I was 20. I'd been working for 8 years already. Why everything's so different?
Life has been so easy for the millennials. Go to university and you're going to get a $50,000 a year job getting out of school. Like, to me, that's nuts. People not being able to graduate the way that they were expecting to, people that are graduating university that don't have jobs. Like, maybe this is the unfortunate dynamic for people to all realize, okay, there's going to be less supply to what I am in demand for. I need to learn how to hustle and how to move, or I'm going to be the one left without the chair when we're playing musical chairs. And I find that, and I think you've seen this as an employer as well, is for the last decade, it has been an employee market, right? Everyone has been fighting to try to get good employees, and we've been paying them more than we should be and putting up with stuff that we might not otherwise put up with. Like, all of those dynamics have happened because there has been too much work and not enough workers. Now we're seeing the inverse, right? Where it is an employer market, and employees now are sadly a dime a dozen, and most are not going back to work because the work that they went to is no longer there. I'm curious how that ends. Anyway, Dan, Mr. Blue Collar, I know that you work with a lot of blue collar families as well. Thanks again for joining us. And for all of you, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this, consider giving a thumbs up, subscribe so you know when we're doing these little things. And now I'm going to go downstairs and get Dan out of my garage. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.